What's going on, y'all? So today we're just gonna review risk management, specifically for 50Ks. I'm gonna go over an eval side and going over an express side as well. So let me just label these ones out real quick. Express slash funded. I'm just gonna review on things that I do, so you don't have to listen to me. So we're gonna start off with just like how to know how each price by ticks are worth. Okay, so starting by just minis, NQ minis and ES minis. These seem like to be like the main pairs that most people trade on. I noticed that other people's also trade micros, but I'd only trade micros if maybe I'm on a funded account, and with evals I'd probably start off with minis, but I mean they all alternate, so it really does depend, to be honest. But we're starting with NQ minis. For each tick it is $5. So if I were to measure out this candle on the left of us from top to bottom, it says in our top right corner right here 515. That number means ticks. So if you were to do the math, what would be 515 times 5? Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this. But by just doing the math, let's say 515 candle. So this entire candle, if it was traded inside your long, you would have made $2,575. And this is a 15-minute candle, 15 minutes to make $2,575. So if you can understand that, it makes things a little bit more easier. So, dragging from top to bottom, I don't know, this one right here. So if you were to start off with where my mouse is at, top left corner, and I measure it down at the swing low, all the way at the bottom, that's a 712 tick that price dropped into. But we're just focusing on ticks right now. So one tick is $5. This is for E-mini NQ. I'm not going to go over points. I don't even know where to find it, really. It says it like when on your ruling and when you're taking longs and shorts, it'll probably say like points. I don't know. I don't go by points. People go by ticks or USD. So for ES though, it is $12.50. So sometimes some people will be like, so then why don't you trade on ES if you're gonna make more money? I don't know really. So for me, everyone has a preference. It's either one or the other. I've done it with some things, but better to just focus on one. Use one pair, trade that pair, and then use the other to find any SMTs or potential on where price will be at later on. This is what ES per tick is for cost. And then moving on to micros. So for micros, MNQ, this is the micro NASDAQ. This would be right here. Micro S&P, this is ES, this is NASDAQ. For micros is a lot more smaller. So just think of a baby version and an adult version when it comes to these pairs. There's NASDAQ adult version, which is the minis, and then the baby version is the micros. On NQ, like an average of $1,500. Micro NQ would be like, $900, $800, $700, something. It depends on your risk to reward ratio. So, for example, this gray box would be my risk. This green box would be my reward, my RR. And it says right here, risk/reward ratio, 3.78. So 3.78 is what I'm making, and I'm risking 0.11%. It says right here. And then you can do the math on what that percent is off of whatever account you're on. But so then for micro ES, this is $1.25 per tick. A lot more than NQ. So if anything, you make more on ES and you make less on NQ. But for some reason, everyone trades NQ. maybe for volatility, some type of different distribution, whatever works with their edge, whatever. I don't know. I just started with one. But anyways, though, when I'm talking about 50K account, this is like a 50K account you would buy off, let's say Top Step. Top Step is the main one that everyone uses. So I will come down over here and start doing math. All right. People will do math every single trade that they take. So you do 50K times 1%. So that 1% will equal what I'm risking. If you want to risk 1% of your account, what would that be? And this is basic math. If I can do it passing as like a average C student when I wasn't trying, I'm sure you guys can do this shit. It's not hard, bro. So that's $500 per trade that we're risking. Okay. So 50K times, let's say 75%, that's 65. 75%. Okay, so then you do the math. What would that give you? That would be $375 per risk. Okay, and then 50K times 0.5% will equal $250. And this is strictly for, I think this math was strictly for NASDAQ. So I gotta label this thing as, and I'm not gonna go through all four. Got me fucked up with that, because this video will actually probably be like more than 30 minutes. So this is what we'd be dealing with per trade if you only trade NQ minis, okay? So I'm just gonna go ahead and move on to micro NQ. So with micro NQ, starting with 50K times 1, just gonna keep on 50K times 0.75. Okay, so then you do the math. So what's 50K times 1%? Only using micro NQs, but you're then looking at what kind of ticks are you risking, and it's the ticks that change. It's not the money in the percents that change. The money percent, whatever you're risking to the account, is what you're fucking putting out on the table to risk. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to change. The only thing that would change when you're dealing with these pairs is how many ticks it actually takes itself. So I'm on micro. $500 times $0.50. So I have $500. I want to know USD converted to ticks. Okay, so going back to MNQ, if one tick is 50 cents, what's $500 per dividing? Oh, timer. We're dividing here. Okay, so that's that. I'm gonna go back to here on NQ minis. NQ minis, 1%. Give me $500. Convert $500 to ticks, and that will be 100 ticks. So this is what we are basically doing. This is the formula, okay? So with whatever percent we're using, what are you either gonna risk 1%, 75%, or 0.75% or 0.5% of your account? You have to ask yourself this. So with looking at Top Step rules, you only have a drawdown of $2,000. So you're thinking, if I'm risking 1% of my account, that's 500. That's 4 trades. 500 times 4 equals 2,000. That's 4 trades I can only take with this account. Eval stage. A lot of people just say it's just leverage a lot more when you're in your evals, because you're not going to get paid. The only thing you're going to get when passing an eval is your certificate saying that you're a funded trader, basically. So it's better to just leverage, get that out the way, so then you can actually be prepared onto then creating a buff for your account. And then once you have that set up, then you can start actually dealing with proper risk management. So you're not going to be leveraging once you go from eval to your funded account. When you're on your funded account, for me, what I would do is I risk 0.5% of my account or 0.75%, depending on price action or what type of news is happening that day. Do I want to de-risk or risk at a normal rate? So it's like one or the other, you know? So you either leverage so you can pass quickly, so then you can start getting paid off of the skills that you know. But then moving on to funded account, either you're going to stay consistent, risking, whatever amount that you're risking. And for example, I put 0.5%. Just be consistent with that. Start building up capital into your funded account, so then you can start risking that amount of money. Or to create, and that's how you create a buff. Or to create your buff, even more, everything so sooner. And this is what I recommend. Not beginners don't do this shit. As long as you can understand your personal edge and how to trade, understand the market, every concept, yada yada, you could start being a lot more confident on how your trades are going to be throughout time. But I know for me, I treated evals like it was a funded account. I was just only risking $250. That's basically it, So either it can take you 2 days to pass an account, or it could take you the full month. So then as you're creating your buff, you can also skip, instead of just being consistent and taking small bites, just say, fuck it, leverage everything. Leverage, then risk manage your account. So you're just going to leverage enough money to create your buff, and then go back to being at a fixed amount that you're going to keep on risking, and be consistent with that with every single trade that you take. And that's just for one account. It's best bet to just have a certain amount of risk. So let's say you're targeting 1 to 2 RR. That 1 to 2 is basically saying you're risking 1%, making double. But obviously we're not going to do a full 1%. So usually it's like, I don't know, it will probably just be like 0.75 to RR. I would only target for 1 to 2 for like beginners. So this example, targeting that 1 to 2 RR would be like this. So let's say I want to risk this amount, and then target for 1 to 2. This is what a 1 to 2 will look like. This can also be a 1 to 2 trade. So let's say I threw down $30. What's 30 times 2? 60. So whatever you risk is whatever you're going to make, doubling. So if you guys don't have any of this down, I would write this down, take a screenshot, whatever you guys want to do. I mean, it's kind of simple, really. It's nothing to be super overcomplicated. So if you guys have any questions at all, always comment down below, and you guys would for sure in my trade recaps be able to see on how I deal with my own risk management with my accounts. I'll go over copy trading later on as time goes on, but this is something I would keep in mind. If you have any curiosity, you guys can do the math for micros. So for ES micro, that's $1.25 per tick. What are you going to do? You're going to find your risk amount. And how to find your risk amount, you decide what percentage you're risking onto the account, okay? When you figure out what percent you're risking onto the account, that equals, you do your little math, and it's just multiplying it from the account that you have. Your little math, you get your USD. Once you get your risk USD, then you divide it. Right here, this is your example. Then you divide it by your ticks. There's 4 sections. There's NQ ticks, ES ticks, those are minis. Then there's micros. There's micro NQ ticks, and there's micro ES ticks. There's always a reason on to why you lost your trades. There's always a reason. and no one to blame but yourself when it comes to trading. So you have to take accountability. I think that's all I wanted to spit out. So thank you for those who were able to make it through this long ass video. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.